I had this client who I talk about quite a lot who, when I met him, he was 17 and a half. And he said, by the time I'm 18, I'm going to be a millionaire. I want to be a millionaire.
I remember having thoughts like that.
Yeah.
Did he become a millionaire?
I don't know if he's a millionaire now. I think he's doing okay for himself.
Wow.
He's working and all that.
Shoot for the stars. You know,
Absolutely.
land for the
So
moon.
he's
awesome.
very entrepreneurial, very innovative. He wasn't a millionaire in 6 months. So he's like, okay, I'll give it another year. And then his goal was then to be a millionaire by 90.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to, squash his enthusiasm. I'm like, okay, you want to be a millionaire? Great. But how? Because there's a million ways to make $1 million. What do you want to do? And then we figured out he wanted to start his own business and create his own clothing line and stuff. So we explored those options.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, thanks for coming down, dude. It's a bit of
No
a drive,
worries.
so
It was.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it was good. No, it was a good run. Yeah, I'm used to driving long distance.
Yeah, yeah. What? Oh, yeah.
Families all over Melbourne and all over the state.
Okay,
so.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a minute since you've been on the field in youth work, and we were discussing it earlier.
Yep.
A little bit, but I wanted to sort of dive in, if it's okay with you,
Of course.
into a little bit about the role. And do you have any sort of scenarios that you can run through, and what's it like? Working with troubled youth. We were obviously discussing a lot of them are in sort of hard situations, I guess.
My take on it is it's been my main career, I guess, for most of my working life. So I started off in hospitality after high school and travelled a bit, just sort of figuring out what I wanted to do. And then got into youth work when I was about 22. And that started when I worked on a summer camp in America, so the Camp America experience. And
I remember you told me about that years ago.
Yeah, well, it was only when I first met you, I think I'd just come off of doing it for a few years.
Yeah.
So I did that, and that was like a travel work program. So you'd get a visa, you'd go over to this summer camp somewhere in the United States. You're there for about 8 to 10 weeks with all American kids. Sometimes they would get kids from other countries, but mostly American. And the staff would be from all around the world. And you would go there to run activities, engage with the kids and basically just have a good time. So I did that. First did that in 2004. And then when I was there, I met some youth workers and met some social workers and got more of an understanding of, the role and what was involved, and really liked working with young people. I found it challenging but fun at the same time.
Yep.
And I just come out of hospitality, which was pretty flat and boring and didn't give you much of a social life. So I was ready for something, and I was ready to study. I hadn't studied since I finished school because I got a terrible ATAR score. Back then it was called a TER score, which I don't even know what it was. That was that bad.
Is it because you just didn't do the homework?
Pretty
or
much.
Was it,
yeah, I had no intention to go into university, but I finished year 12. I thought I'll do the right thing. I'll finish high school. And I met all my mates from school, so it wasn't a complete loss.
Yeah, of course. No way.
And then I went back as a mature age student at the age of 22, and I'm like, now I'm ready to study. I know what I want to do. And I went and studied youth work and got a job in a high school. That was my first youth work job. And then it went from there. And, I worked as a youth worker consistently for about 12 years before I became a trainer. And now I teach youth work. So I'm still in the industry of, I guess, youth and working with youth, but just I've changed roles. Yeah.
What's the state of youth work in Australia? Like, do you think that we support our youth, by and large? Do you think we have like a lot of systems in place to make sure that we're supporting the youth?
There's definitely a lot of systems in place. So I guess there's two ways to answer that question. There's the government support, which they don't always get it right. Doesn't matter which government it is. And they do provide funding to support youth through lots of different initiatives. Real youth work happens, I guess, at the non-for-profit level. So I guess youth work is defined by just working with youth, and youth is aged 12 to 25. Yep. So you can work in a school, you could run a recreational program, you could run camps like I used to do. You can work with young people at a mentoring level. So there's lots of different things you can do. My sort of major involvement was working for non-for-profit agencies. So those are agencies you might have heard of, like Anglicare, Salvation Army, Mission Australia, those kinds of places. Yeah. And they apply for funding from the government, and they run all kinds of different programs, and they all work with adults, they work with kids, the homeless, all kinds of stuff. So I worked with organisations that had a youth service component to them, and in that role you're you're supporting young people with whatever is going on for them, whatever stage they're at. So Australia is good because we have a lot of services. They're all free, of course, because the young person has to voluntarily work with the service in most cases. So it needs to be free. And we've got really good workers and we've got good training here for youth workers. We don't have enough youth workers though, which is the issue.
Yeah.
And they always need more male youth workers as well. So any guys listening who want to get into this field of work, you'll get work, no problem.
Oh, that's good.
So which is really good. And it's typically seen, a lot of society's understanding is that if you work in health or community services, it is a mostly female-dominated industry.
Yep.
But more and more guys are coming into it, which is great. When I started working in it way back when it was mostly women in the industry, like I quite often might have been 2 or 3 guys there out of a team of 20 or 30 women. So, we guys kind of stuck together and helped each other out and stuff. But more and more men are coming into it. And especially since the pandemic and COVID, you've got more people exploring the community services.
And do you think it's important to have that balance between men and women?
Of course, yeah. Because as a youth worker, you're one of the most consistent adults in a young person's life, which is why youth workers come into their life, because the parents or adults they had in their life before were not consistent, either because they just weren't able to look after the young person,
right,
or they didn't want to look after the young person, unfortunately. So that's how the young person gets connected with services like DHHS, the department, and then the department will then allocate them to a youth worker. So that was my role as a youth worker, and you, like a mentor, big brother, you're there to be friendly to them. You're not necessarily their friend. You don't hang out with them after work or on the weekend. And that's how it works, really.
Do they end up sort of considering you as family almost?
Some of them can.
Yeah.
I had some clients who were like, you're my 25th worker, get lost, I've seen it, I've got rid of all my workers, I'll get rid of you, sort of thing.
Wow.
So, they don't say that, but that can be their attitude. Because
has anyone tried to get rid of you?
Oh, yeah, a couple of times.
Can you tell us how that happened?
Stuck in there.
Yeah.
Just making complaints and saying I did things that I didn't do. So as a youth worker, it's really important that you take notes and about every conversation that you have.
Yeah.
For your records and to be able to keep track of what you're doing. But sometimes you might have a client who'll make a complaint, and I used to take that personally at the start. I'd be like, but I'm being so nice. Like, what's the problem? I don't get it. But it was later, because they'd had so many adults come into their life. It was hard for them to trust people.
Yeah.
And relationships had been broken and they'd been let down.
Yeah.
Because like in any industry, not any job, you've got good workers, you've got great workers, and you've got okay workers, and then you've got terrible workers. And that's everywhere, not just my industry, in every industry, for whatever reason. So sometimes a young person can get a crappy worker. I consider myself a good worker, because I was always there and I was reliable. I made plenty of mistakes, of course, but I'd learned quickly to own up to those mistakes and let the young person know, it's like, hey, sorry I gave you the wrong information. Sorry I misunderstood that, whatever. Let's move on, let's work it out. And that's a big part of youth work as well, because the young person is looking to you as an example of how adults should be.
Yeah.
So you're always got to think about how you're modeling behavior for them.
Definitely.
Because they look to you and they watch you very closely, because you're one of the main adults in their life.
How does like the initial engagement sort of look like? Can you sort of paint a picture for us in terms of the very first meeting, and then what does that kind of look like? Yeah,
sure. So it varies from job to job, but I guess in my experience as like a caseworker, which was my main type of youth work role, you might have anywhere from 8 to 12 young people or clients that you work with at a time. Yeah. And you might see them once every couple of weeks, sometimes more. So meeting them for the first time, they would be usually referred to our service by their DHHS worker, or they might refer themselves. They might just walk in one day and say, I need a place to live. I need a job. Or the worker will call you up and say, we've got this client. He doesn't know what he wants to do. We think your service would be good for him. So then they come in for that appointment, and then you sit down and just tell them a bit about the agency, how you can help them, and talk to them about, privacy and confidentiality, making sure that whatever information they share with you that you'll keep private unless it's important to their health and safety, and then you might need to share it with someone else. and that you're there to support them and advocate them, not to do everything for them, but to teach them how to start doing things for themselves, So we call that advocacy in youth work. Yeah. So you advocate for them. So you're a voice for them. You let them know that what you can do, but you also have to let them know what you can't do. You've got to be really clear on those boundaries. So then there's no disappointment, and then they can't make complaints about you. Like I got it in the early days when I overpromised things because I just wanted to please every client. And then I learned, well, you don't always have to please them. You just have to be honest with them.
Do you have like a work number and a personal number? So there's separate numbers there?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So in most youth worker roles, you would get a mobile phone. And that was how we communicated with young people a lot, was texting and calling, which was hard because they would never answer their phone, or they wouldn't have any credit, or they'd have 12 different phones because they kept losing them, or they wanted different numbers for different people to remain anonymous, all this kind of stuff. So,
go ahead, man.
I was just going to say, like, with the anonymous and the confidentiality, is it more a formality, or do the people that come in actually feel like sometimes, what they say can be sort of, taken out and like be repeated somewhere else? Do they generally feel
that's a good question. So that comes down to something that we call duty of care. Yeah. So when you're working with any kind of client or a patient, so doctors do this, teachers do this, where that client or patient is going to share personal and sensitive information with you about them, about their health, their family, whether they maybe taking drugs, whether they've got legal issues. You let them know at the start, so whatever you want to tell me, I'll listen to you. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to support you. So if they say to you, like, yeah, sometimes I smoke weed, or sometimes I take ice, and you're like, okay, I'm not going to tell anyone that unless you give me permission to. Yeah. Because the young person might tell you that just so you know, but they're not ready to stop using yet. They may not be at that stage. Right. If they're ready to stop using, you're like, okay, well, I can link you in with a drug and alcohol service, or we can get you booked into detox or rehab. So I'll have to tell that worker what you've told me. So their information with other people. Coming back to duty of care though, so if in all the different conversations you have with a young person, if they say to you, look, I'm feeling like I want to hurt myself, I'm feeling suicidal, or I want to hurt someone else, then you're like, okay, well, since you've told me that, I'm going to have to notify someone about this, because you're saying that you're feeling at risk to yourself, or that you could cause harm or risk to someone else. So that's duty of care. So that would be the only time you would have to break or breach that privacy or confidentiality.
Have you ever had to breach that privacy?
A few times, yeah.
Do you remember the first time you had to do that?
Not specifically, no, but there was certainly a few clients I worked with over the years who were regularly thinking about harming themselves, or had suicidal thoughts. Some of them had attempted suicide before. So they knew when I came on board, they'd had enough workers to know that once they start to tell you that you are going to have to tell someone. And if they're sharing it with you, it's usually because they want help. If they didn't want any help, they just wouldn't tell you.
Does that make you
right?
Yeah. Does that make you really, really nervous though, when like you find out that the case that you're going to be working on is someone who has attempted suicide, and you like that, especially the very first time?
Definitely. Like it took me a few years.
You'd be on eggshells almost, right?
Yeah,
like,
that's
and
right.
there's huge responsibility.
That's right. It is a big responsibility, and you're worried about whether or not you're going to say the right thing, and am I responding properly? And in the first few years of youth work are the toughest. That's where I hit burnout a couple of times and thought, geez, is this actually for me? I don't know if I'm made for this. But you've got to stick it out, because the more you hear it, the more you learn, you understand it, and you start to deal with it. And it does give you a bit of a tougher skin. That's not to say that you become desensitized and you're just like, oh, okay, you're suicidal. All right, yep, I've heard that before. It's not like that. Yeah. But you learn to manage your own thoughts and emotions just through time and experience. So at the start, it was hard. But then once I understood the individual young person and where they were coming from, I'm like, okay, I can see why they think that that's an option for them because of what they've been through. And I would just say, look, thank you for telling me. I'm not the person to help you with this specifically, but how about we get you booked in with a counselor or something? So then I would help them. But I did some training around how to respond to someone who said, I'm feeling suicidal. There's an actual acronym called ASSIST. I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but it's a series of questions that you ask someone after they've said to you, I'm feeling suicidal. And it helps you understand what they're feeling, whether or not they have a plan, and that you are there to listen and help them. And then usually a conversation ends with them agreeing to take some kind of action, like go see a doctor or go meet with a counsellor, and then you just facilitate that process. So as a youth worker, you're doing a lot of that. You're the first point of call for most clients, the one that they're going to talk to first before they talk to any other worker. Yep. So you're there to listen and then show them the way to go talk to someone more specifically about an issue. Yeah.
I feel like if putting myself in the shoes of someone like coming to see an health worker, I think I would want to feel trust and like heard, but also part of me would be like, give me something that I can action straight away, like out of that first or second session, or I would start to feel like, this is a waste, waste of time. This is not working.
Yep.
Did you have like certain, like tools or things that you felt like you could give to, people who came to see you to walk away with, like in the early sessions?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and each young person is different. Some of them who are experienced with workers and services are instantly looking at you thinking like, okay, what can I get from this worker? Yeah. Can you get me a house? Can you get me money? Can you pay all my bills for me? Right? Because they're just about survival, right?
Yeah.
So some of them just it could be their first time connecting with a youth worker, so they're not really sure how the process works. In either situation, the first session is just building rapport and trust. So like, let's just have a talk, kind of like what we're doing now. It's like, let's just talk, get to know each other a bit. There's got to be that, not that chemistry. It's not like that, because chemistry is more like with friends and partners. When it comes to a client, it's rapport. So being able to just talk to them on their level, explaining things in terms that they understand. So not being clinical, not talking down to them, because they'll pick up on that straight away, and then you've lost them.
You have to relate to them a little bit too,
right?
You've
got to relate to them, yeah. So it doesn't mean you have to try and be really young and hip and cool. It's like be yourself.
Yo, what's up, dude?
Yeah.
I heard you're having a bad time.
Absolutely. They'll be like, who's this dickhead? Yeah. All right, so
you got the backwards cap on.
That's it. No, that wouldn't work in my case, definitely not.
Yeah.
Because my natural way of talking is I'm pretty just straight and level-headed in that. And some young people liked that, others didn't. And, you're not going to hit it off with every client.
Yeah.
But if you just let them know, it's like, okay, well, let's just get to know each other a little bit. Tell me what's going on for you. How can I help you? So that first session is about the rapport building and just letting them know that even if they don't trust you yet, that you are a trustworthy person, that you're going to be honest with them, that eventually that they can open up to you and they're not going to be judged, and it's a safe space to do that. Some will do that after a few sessions. I had clients that would take 6 months before they even agreed to sit down with me. I was chasing them up on the phone, knocking on their door.
6 months.
Yeah, and some clients who are really transient, so like they're just constantly on the go and can't sit still for more than 5 minutes. So that was hard. But yeah, so coming back to your question, it's about building that trust and rapport first. And then depending on what program or role you're in, usually you'll have a specific focus. So one of my roles for 3 years was I worked on this program called Springboard. Yeah. And it was helping young people who were coming out of child protection and youth justice to find a job or get into education, while also trying to find a place to live and become more independent. So I focused on like the education and employment stuff. So usually by the first session, it was just like, what are you interested in? Do you want to work or study? And they're like, just work. I'm like, cool. Second session, all right, have you worked before? Yeah. What kind of job do you want? Let's do your resume. And then each session by session, you're just working on little small steps. And then depending on the client, how fast they want to move, like someone said, I want a job in 30 days. I had this client who I talk about quite a lot who, when I met him, he was 17 and a half. And he said, by the time I'm 18, I'm going to be a millionaire. I want to be a millionaire.
I remember having thoughts like that.
Yeah,
did he become a millionaire?
I don't know if he's a millionaire now. I think he's doing okay for himself.
Wow.
He's working and all that.
Shoot for the stars.
Absolutely. So
That's
he's
awesome.
very entrepreneurial, very innovative. He wasn't a millionaire in 6 months. So he's like, okay, I'll give it another year. And then his goal was then to be a millionaire by 19.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to, squash his enthusiasm. I'm like, okay, you want to be a millionaire? Great. But how? Because there's a million ways to make $1 million. What do you want to do? And then we figured out he wanted to start his own business and create his own clothing line and stuff. So we explored those options.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Do you have any stories, like success stories of any of your clients that like you still think about today? Is just come past and go, wow, I can't believe that person was here.
Yeah.
And then this was a horrible situation to be in.
100%.
And then they pushed tooth and nail and they fought with you. And now they're completely transformed individual.
Absolutely, there's a few, and one of them has become like this youth ambassador now and does a lot of public speaking and works with organisations, and I still have quite a bit of contact with him. And if he's watching this, he'll know who he is. I won't say his name, but he'll probably comment in the comment section. So he's done really well for himself. There was another young guy I worked with who, great young bloke, had good intentions, wanted to study, loved reading, loved learning. Unfortunately, came from a very unsupportive family where his mum and sister basically would like gang up on him and exclude him from things and would make things deliberately very difficult for him. So a long history there of sort of mental health and stuff.
Yeah.
And we were driving in the car one day, and I'd just driven him to his mum's house to pick up some stuff because he was moving into his own place. And he didn't want me to come into the house. He was in there for about 20 minutes, and he came back to the car all teary-eyed. We start driving. I'm like, "What's up?" He's like, "Oh, just my mum and sister. Like, it's like they just want to make things awful for me, right?" And he was starting to make some traction. Like, he got a place to live. He had a job 2 days a week. He was enrolled in a course, so he was doing really well. And like, you know what, mate, you're doing really well, but sometimes your family is your family. You can't choose your family, and sometimes you don't always get along with your family members. And if they're choosing to be that way, that's fine. But you've got to be your own man. You know, you've got to be your own guy. He was like 18, 19 at the time. And he just started like bawling. His tears just came out. And he's just like, "You're right. I just need to let them go because I'm better than this." That's what he said.
It's sad. It's a sad realization to come to.
But that was a huge shift and breakthrough for him. That like he's like, I deserve better than how they're treating me, and I'm going to go and do that, right? Yeah. And then by the time I finished working with him, he was in a really great space. A few years later, I had his email, shot him an email. He'd had a girlfriend. He was working. He was studying to be a teacher, and he had a baby on the way, all like within 3 or 4 years later.
Wow.
So
3 or 4 years.
Great success story. And he a couple other clients I've just bumped into out and about, and some of them are still kind of where they are, but surviving, and others are doing really well. So,
what do you think is the difference between someone not doing so well and it's a story like that? Do you think a lot of it is just letting go of that baggage, the trauma, and the people in your life that are not supporting you? And
I think the young people who come through the system and go on and find themselves a life and become independent, it's not necessarily, they don't get over what's happened to them. They just learn to live with it.
Yep.
They learn to live with it because the trauma is always going to be there.
Yeah.
Right. But once they start making different choices, it's like, instead of partying with my mates every night, I'm going to go and get a job, or I'm going to go and study. I'm going to stop taking drugs, or I'm going to reduce. If they start to make those choices and actually follow through on it, knowing that there's going to be people on the other side waiting for them who are going to support them through that, then they start to move in that right direction. But if they're still surrounded by the people who cause the problems and reinforce the problems, it's really hard to break away from that.
Yeah, I guess so as well, because then, if you're engaging in that bad behavior, they're not going to call you out on it. In fact, they're probably going to support it and do it themselves. So then
no one's challenging them.
You downplay how bad it is.
That's right. That's right. It becomes normalized until a worker comes along, and as a youth worker, you're not there to say, you know what, you need to stop doing that. Stop doing drugs. Stop sleeping in. So stop being a layabout, because that's how society is talking to them, right? Like, you're a job kick, you're hopeless. We come along and it's like, right, so you sleep into 12 o'clock every day. Can you tell me why? He's like, I'm up all night playing video games. It's like, cool. Why are you up all night playing video games? It's because I've got nothing to do. Okay. Would you like to have something to do? He's like, yeah, of course. It's like, what do you want to do? It's like, I want to get a job. Cool. Have you worked in a job before? He's like, no one's going to hire me. I've got no experience. I'm like, no, that's not true. Let's look at some stuff. And you start having conversations. And a lot of youth work is, you don't see the results until years later, if ever at all. Like, at the time I was working with those clients I was talking about before, when I was working with them, they were in those dark places, right? And you don't know if they're going to make it, right? But what you do is you're planting seeds in their mind to say,
like possibilities. There's something else out there.
You can have a better future. You can be independent. You can move away from that gang you've been with and be your own person. You can get a job and keep a job. You don't have to be your past, So it's about planting those seeds, and eventually they get it. They'll have that moment. It's like, now I get it. Now I know what Brian was talking about years ago.
It's interesting, I guess. Some people, and I've done this in my life before, you identify with the trauma almost. It becomes part of you.
Yeah.
You know, and the way you talk to yourself is like, this is just what I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's reality, but it's not reality. There's so many possibilities out there, and it's not until you actually, you know, start backing yourself a little bit, you open doors and you realize, wow, I can change my whole life. I can change myself.
Yeah.
First and foremost. And I think that's the main part, right?
It is. It's
like
learning to live with it. Yeah.
It's like be the person that it's not acceptable to sleep in, you know, to 12, and be like, and actually be that person.
Yep.
It's just like, I'm always up at 8.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's right. It's about believing you can be that person first, and then the changes will start to happen. Yeah. It takes time though. Yeah.
Definitely. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who really love and respect you for everything you've been doing over the years.
Yeah.
I definitely respect everything you've been doing, and that's, you know, obviously, you know, we've stayed in contact over the years,
many years.
But you always, you just, when I met you and I was very young, I remember just that warmth in your personality, you know, just like that willingness to listen and engage, and it was like, this guy's no bullshit, you know, like he actually is just talking to me. He wants to, you know what I mean, help me.
Yeah.
And that's rare, man. Like I feel like that's not always, you know, that's who you are. So you probably take it for granted in a way, but it's actually quite rare.
Thank you.
Know?
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah. It's it's what I try to do. You know, when I was a youth worker, I thought, why didn't I have a youth worker when I was young? Maybe I would have actually liked school and done better. But I try to be the youth worker for clients that I would have liked to be for me. Someone who's going to just be there no matter what, on your best days and your worst days, because it's like you've got to live with yourself on your best days and your worst days. So if you teach young people, like there's someone out there who will be with you on your best days and worst days, you're teaching them how to have that relationship with themselves, because a lot of youth work is modeling behavior.
Yeah.
Because you're a young adult who comes into a client's life, you're consistent, you respect them no matter what. Obviously, you're not going to turn a blind eye to the things they do. You got to sit down and be like, "Come on, mate. How many times do you need to steal a car before you go to jail? Like, it's not Grand Theft Auto. You know? It's not cool. Like, just cut it out, right? Sometimes you got to be that guy, play good cop, bad cop. But you do it in a way that's respectful, and you try to understand why they're doing it, and then channel that urge or whatever they're stealing the car for into a different direction. And then that's refreshing for them. They're kind of like, oh, so you're not going to call the cops on me? I'm like, no, that's not my job, mate. I don't have to call the cops of you. If you keep stealing cars, eventually you'll get caught. I don't have to be like, yeah, mate, he's down the street. Just, pull him over. You know, we won't do that. You know what I mean? So they have to learn that there's consequences of their own behaviour. And if they change their behaviour, then the consequences shift and it's something different. So so it's about just letting them make the change, but you're just showing them what's possible.
Yeah. Yeah, lots of stuff to think about. I just thought, as you were saying that, I know this might sound like a very generic question, but I feel like it's appropriate at this point in time. You know, it's for anyone listening, I guess, who isn't stuck in a situation that they feel has complete power over them, right? How would you, if you were to talk to that person, what would you do to help that person at first? Like, as in how... Yep. Is there any advice you could give that person to sort of, you know, like take the power back in their life?
Well, I think what you're talking about there is how hard it is to create change, and it's hard for everyone. Before you change any situation, you've got to change the way you look at the situation, right? So I've worked with young people who, like, they're not going to have their own house in a week. They're not going to have a job tomorrow. They're not going to be off drugs completely in 2 days, right? It takes time. So you have to change the way you look at the situation, and then you start introducing small changes to that situation. And that's accountability. That's where you're like, okay, I'm saying this is how I want it to be. I need to take responsibility for that. Because as youth workers, like I said before, we support and assist. We don't come in and fix everything for them, because that's not really helping someone. Because after they exit youth services, they've got to become independent young adults and learn to be on their own comfortably and do things for themselves, you know? So it's about helping them change their perceptions about things and be like, okay, so you don't like the house you're living in right now, but would you agree that having a roof over your head with electricity and running water and a bed to sleep in every night is better than nothing at all. I guess you're probably right. So they start to appreciate what they have and use it, and then they can make
gratitude almost.
Make things better,
Yeah, extreme gratitude. I've been actually practicing that the last few years myself, and I found it's opened doors, huge amount of doors.
Oh, yeah. Gratitude like the gratitude effect, it's priceless.
Yeah, like I remember through COVID, so just before COVID I lost my job and my partner at the time and my stepmother, all in the same like like few months.
It's a rough time.
And it was the first time I sort of experienced death like up close, and and like extreme sickness as well, I guess. So I sort of broke down. I went through a whole quite a few months of mental health issues. But one of the things is I came good. I worked really hard. I reached out to a lot of professionals, and it was a long, long journey. But when I got better, I got a job. So COVID was happening, and I got a remote job just doing sales, right? And I used to look down on those jobs in sales, right? But now I had a different perspective. I was like, I have this opportunity to work from home, earn money. Maybe it's not as much money as I was earning before, but I can do it remotely. And I'm just so grateful as this opportunity to be able to earn again. Because I was so, when I was unwell, I was just, obviously also, struggling with money.
Sure.
And just that gratitude, I just kept it. And just over time, I've built an entire life now. You know what I mean? And it's crazy. Like gratitude is extremely powerful.
For sure. And I think COVID forced us all to be more grateful because we really didn't have a choice, especially for those of us living in Melbourne where we were like prisoners for a while. It's like whatever job you've got, don't throw it away now because it might not be there tomorrow and there's no guarantee that there'll be another job waiting for you. It's like life kind of came to this grinding halt. So it was like wherever you lived, wherever you worked, whoever was in your house with you, that was your world.
That was your world.
So you had to make do, right? And that's great that you were able to turn that around. And I think it's so true that once you have gratitude, you can see that you don't really lose or gain things. Things just change form. One of my mentors, Dr. John D. Martini, says there's no gain or loss. There's only transformation.
Yeah.
So it's like it may not be the amount of money you had before, but then by being able to work from home and have a job, what have you gained that you might have lost? You know what I mean? Like it just changes form. It's like, I'm not making as much money, but now I'm at home. I've got more time to do these projects. I've got more time to spend with my family.
Yeah.
So it's like you trade something for something. It's not necessarily like I've lost it all. It's like something just changes form, and then you gain something else. Yeah.
Definitely, and that's a really good way of putting it. I feel like for me, when I got to the lowest point. In that period, I no longer feared death. It was just strange. Like I just to get well, I had to not fear death almost, right? Because my brain was constantly triggered, like highest amount of fear, right? So the only way to get well was to truly be like, okay, I actually don't care if I die. And then I started to get better.
Yep.
And one of my mentors, I don't know if you heard of David Goggins.
No.
David Goggins, ex-Navy SEAL.
Oh, cool.
He's awesome.
Yep.
I love him, dude. I talk about him all the time. I'm not as intense as Goggins. Like he does 100K runs. He's all about being scarier than the shit that scares you type thing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Which is I love it. But
Navy SEAL mentality. Yeah.
Yeah, like when I was at the lowest point, I used that mentality of just sort of I don't know. I just didn't care if I died, so to speak. So I would just, even if I didn't sleep, I'd just go out and run 10K, 20K. I was just whatever I need to do just to get better, to give me a chance to get better. It wasn't even guaranteed.
That's it.
I was just a turn up for myself.
Yeah, you show up. It's you face whatever it is you're afraid of because if you don't, then you build it up in your mind and it just gets scarier and bigger and bolder, and then that's when we start to withdraw and avoid it, and then all these other problems then happen, and it's starts off it's like the example I say. It's like you've got a little spot fire. You might be like, that's nothing, but then it creates another one. Eventually, you've got a fire. Yeah, it's like you got to put out the spot fires, and that's and the thing you're worried about is usually not as bad as you think it's going to be. Yeah, you just got to move. If you're feeling crap, go for a walk, go for a run. I do it all the time. Yeah, it's like get moving. Like if you've been sitting down for too long, the your physiology, you're in a slump. You're like, ugh. You're like
It's
I've been
me all
watching
day,
Netflix for
just
9 hours. God, the world sucks. It's so depressing. It's because you're in this, like, your body's in this depressed slump, right?
Yeah.
Get up, go outside, jump on a trampoline, just do something out of the ordinary. Dance even, like whatever works, you know. I wrestle with my dog still, you know. Like I get on the floor and wrestle with him. It's great.
That's awesome.
It settles him down and it gets my frustrations out. So just finding those little things, you know.
Yeah, 100%. I was going to say as well, you mentioned earlier that some of your clients were in gangs. Is that right? What was it like working with people? Yeah. Did you ever feel like scared?
No. Like a lot of them liked to just let people know they were in a gang. And in most cities, you've got like the Bloods and the Crips, right? So that's everywhere. You're either in the Bloods or the Crips, right? And that's very... that we've been very Americanized, and that's a lot to do with.
We have the Bloods
media.
and the Crips here, do we?
Yeah, apparently.
I didn't know that.
I didn't even know
Back
that.
when I was a youth worker, one of my clients was in. He tried to swap gangs, and it was you know, it caused problems in the hood and all this stuff. But it's all very petty, you know. I had a young person who was part of this so-called gang. This was back around 2014, and when you hear about youth crime on the news, like the news is like, youth crime wave, when will it ever end? You know, the truth is it'll never end. Crime is crime, right? Whether it's youth, kids stealing lollipops, adults embezzling money at work, crime is constant. So like when the media is like, there's been 2 stabbings by teens in Werribee in 2 days, it's not like there's this new crime wave's got to explode. It's like, it's the media, right? So,
yeah, of course.
But back in 2014, there actually was a bit of a trend with the young people I was working with where they were stealing a particular type of car, driving it back to show their mates. So it was like this sort of Grand Theft Auto. And that was the influence of the game. It was like walk around, see the car, steal it, drive it back, show your mates, sell it, get street cred. And then, that was going on. And a young person I worked with got caught stealing one of these cars and it was like the 7th one he'd stolen.
Wow.
Of this type, and then unfortunately...
Can you tell us the type? It wasn't a Skoda, was it?
I don't think so.
Could have been.
Probably not.
I can't remember.
Honda Civic.
We'll keep it a secret.
But in my early days of
Lamborghini.
youth work, something similar was going on, and it was like the Subarus back then.
Yeah,
in the
right.
early 2000s when that Subarus were the bomb.
I think I remember like Turak had an issue there at some point. Didn't it? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's it. You do get you'll get a targeted type of crime in an area for a while when they think they can get away with it.
Yeah.
And then it fizzles out and dies down because it's like, all right,
What's the penalty?
There's too much heat on us. We've got to get out of here, you know?
What's the penalty on stealing a car these days? Do you know?
I mean,
Jail time, I'd say.
pretty much straight away. Look, with young people, it's different, and that's why we have the youth justice system. Because if a young person becomes an offender early on, there's a high chance they'll be an offender as an adult. So the youth justice system's whole thinking is like, we're going to intervene and take them through a form of rehabilitation so they'll stop offending and not become adults in the system for the rest of their life, right?
Right.
So youth justice will allocate a youth justice case manager who will supervise a young person who is either coming in and out of custody or is out on the community on bail or parole or what we call an order. So the idea there is there's certain levels of orders they will go through. And if they breach all of those orders, which means they keep offending even after all those warnings and short stints at Parkville, which is the youth jail, then they'll get sent to, once they're 18, they'll get sent to somewhere like Port Phillip, which is adult prison. So if they're still committing crimes at that age, most likely they're going to be in and out of custody most of their life. So youth justice is about getting to them early and trying to intervene and introduce programs and services to get them to behave in different ways.
From your experience, do you think crime or criminal activity, do you think there's a huge correlation between damaged homes for kids?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. When you think of what we label as crime is the young person committing it may not think it's a crime.
Right.
They're just like, I'm angry, I'm going to walk down the street and kick down this letterbox.
Yeah.
Because I'm so angry, I've got to let it out. So they're not like going out to be like, I'm going to be a criminal. It's like they're just lashing out, but what they're doing is damaging public property. And if they get caught, then they can get charged, right? So a lot of it is coming from poor mental health, or they're doing it on substances, so they're substance affected, on alcohol, drugs, or it's a peer pressure thing. So they're doing it to get accepted by certain peers to get street cred, to be seen as worthy, if it's about acceptance. So there's lots of different factors.
And fear, like in their group, right? I want to be the head alpha.
Yep.
I'll
if I don't do
anything.
this, they won't accept me. They won't make me one of them. And that could be whatever group or gang they're in. It's like that's their family in their mind, right? So they don't see what they're doing is wrong. They can always justify it. But society sees it as like, oh, youth delinquents just going out there to cause trouble.
If you were to have like somebody come up to you and say, hey, I've got like a younger brother or sister and I'm worried about them and like, you know, they might join, I feel like they're getting into trouble, hanging around with the wrong people or maybe it's just anxiety, depression they're going through, you know, the ebbs, right?
Yeah.
What advice would you give to like, or what do you think the conversations should be when you're talking to the people that are around the people you know, you're trying to support, like whether you're a sibling or partner or...
Yeah, do you have to have conversations with the people around them? I imagine you would,
sometimes you do. So sometimes you'll have a client who technically is your client and then in some cases you'll have contact with a member of their family. It could be the mum, the dad, it could be an uncle, it could be a cousin, whoever's involved in their life and is supporting them. Most of the young people I worked with, I had no contact with their parents at all because, you know, at some point the parents were either unable or unwilling to care for them, so they're kind of not in the picture. But later on in my youth work career, I was working for like just local government youth services, and I ran a drop-in centre. And most young people know most young people's knowledge of youth work is, every town has a drop-in centre or a youth centre. You can go there and meet a youth worker. You can go there and maybe get something to eat, hang out, meet some young people. Most of us had something like that growing up. So that's, for a lot of young people, is sort of their first entry point into services. So when I was working there, occasionally we would have people just come in off the street and say, hi, are you a youth worker or a social worker? I'm like, yep, I'm a youth worker. And they'll be like, could I just get some advice? I'm worried about my son. I'm worried about my nephew. I'm worried about my partner. And then we could sit down and have a conversation and give out free information. Obviously, if they're talking about someone who's not a client of yours, you can't necessarily get specific information. Yeah. But you can give sort of general advice. Yeah. You could say, okay, thank you for coming in today. You're obviously worried about your sister or your friend. Tell me a little bit about them or whatever you want to tell me. What's going on? Why are you worried about them? And you try and equip that person who's come to ask for your help with some resource or information they can then take back and use to talk to that person. Yeah. And then you could do a bit of a follow-up and say, how about I call you in a week and let me know how it goes. Or you might say to the person who's coming, do you want to go back to your son, daughter, brother, sister, whatever, get them to come in and meet with me and then maybe I could help them. So, sometimes you can do that as a youth worker as well, which again comes back to the advocacy of what youth work's all about,
Did you ever grow attached to any of your clients emotionally?
Not really. Look, you're not allowed to have favourites, but I certainly had a few clients who I'm like, awesome, I get to hang out with this guy today.
Like, did it really, like them succeeding, did it really matter to you? Did you feel like, like this is on my mind? Like, I really hope Miles doesn't take drugs again.
Yeah, look, at the start, because I'm naturally a very like goal-driven kind of guy. I like outcomes, I like results. I'm about progress and moving forward. And so that was projecting out into my youth work. So I was expecting, if I talk about the stuff with my clients, they'll be goal-driven. They'll be successful. Right. And then they weren't. And I was being like, is it something wrong with me? Am I not connecting with them? Yeah. So I learned pretty early on that it's not always about the results and the success and the outcomes. Everyone moves at their own pace. You know, I like to say different ages, different stages. Everyone's at different ages at different stages, or vice versa. So it's about finding out what their version of success is and helping them map that out. And you're just there to help them step by step, right? So you learn to disassociate yourself with what you want for them and help them determine what they want for them, and you're just there to sort of support that. So that kind of prompted me to then become a life coach and like, youth work is not quite moving at the pace I'm used to, like because I was goal-driven, I was very proactive about a lot of stuff. So then I did coaching on the side, and that sort of became my outlet to work with young people who are at the other end, who are a little bit more high achieving, came from a more well-adjusted home, who were like, yeah, I'm ready to take on the world. I'm like, fantastic, let's go. So I would work with them to sort of get that experience, and then I could go back to youth work and be like, oh, it's taken me 6 months just to get this kid to open the door. You know what I mean? So two real complete ends of the spectrum. But I found that balance. So I was able to be okay with the pace of youth work because I found life coaching suited me more. And then I combined the two and did youth life coaching. So
that would have made you pretty unique in terms of like compared to the other youth workers, because you had the coaching and development, and you probably were able to bring that to
100%.
So
yeah, like I thought they were going to be two very separate things, and they were to a degree, but like life coaching is a tool, you know, and it's not the answer to life. And a lot of people are kind of like, life coach, what do you
sometimes
tell me
things
what
are
to
just
do?
exactly like you can have all the tools in your bag, but you know sometimes things are just out of our control.
Yeah,
you know, you'll be driving down the street 60 kilometers speed limit, and someone just bang hits you with the tail. You know, that's
you never know, man. Yeah, that's it. And life coaching, I learned that the tools I learned from life coaching were like the main tool you learn from it really is how to be a good question asker. The power of being able to ask people really effective questions that get them to think has changed everything for me personally, but also how I now work with people, where like I might know what they need to do. Like they're saying their problem to me, I'm like, yeah, I've heard this before. This is a common problem for this age. Rather than me be like, right, so here's what you need to do. Step 1, step 2, step 3.
Yeah.
They're just like, okay, you're lecturing me, Brian. It's more like, okay, so what have you tried before that's worked? What could you try differently? Who would you need to help you with that? What would you need to support you with that? Right? So those types of questions, and people are like, oh, yeah, you know, or they're like, I don't know. So then you go back and you ask the same question a different way until you get the question that makes them go, oh, now I get it. It clicks, right? And it's that's the real power of coaching, is asking those quality questions.
And what do you think like the biggest challenge or objective of that is? Is it like trying to help kids find their clarity and purpose in what the future looks like? Or
Yeah, that's it. It's because it's different for everyone. So, you know, usually in coaching, and I'd learnt this over time, and I was applying it to the youth work as well, is, you know, it's about those 3 stages. It's about a mindset, get clear, get focused, get motivated. Who do you want to be? What do you want to do? And why? And then the skill set. What do you need to be able to do well to achieve that? And what do you need to learn to be able to achieve that? And then take action. So most people go from mindset straight to action. Like they wake up in the morning and it's like, right, this is the day. You know, I'm going to tell my boss exactly what I want. You get to work and you freeze. You're like, I don't know what to say. Shit, I'll try tomorrow. Or I'll wait till next year. Things will be better then, right? And then it never changes, right? So people trying to rush from mindset to action. It's like the middle part is the skill set. It's like, how do I say what I want to say in the way I want to say it and stuff? So that's the process you go through, and everyone does that differently. You know?
I can relate to that. Like you scroll through Instagram and you see something motivational or inspirational, and you're like, all right, tomorrow, you know, I'm going to hit it. I'm going to change my life. And you put so much pressure on yourself all of a sudden, and like you don't live up to your own expectations.
Because like you were saying earlier, it's little steps.
Yeah.
It's like it's getting up a little earlier. It's eating, it's choosing to eat something a little healthier.
Definitely.
It's going for that walk. And, you know, it compounds. And then all of a sudden you're a different person. You know, your situation. Effect. But if you can communicate that to young people early, that's so effective.
Oh,
I never knew that. Like when I just thought I had to become this amazing, famous actor. You know what I mean? That'd solve all my problems. Remember, I was obsessed with it.
Of course,
right?
Of course. Yeah.
And then I just put so much expectation on it that I fell out of love with it in a way because it was just so much pressure on myself.
Too much pressure.
Right?
Yeah.
And I made a couple of films, and that was a lot of fun, but it was also extremely stressful. Who knows? Maybe I'll revisit that again one day. But for now, I'm just happy just learning from other people. You know, I just wanted to sort of go down a different path for a second, Brian, if you don't mind.
Anywhere you want to go.
We're
down the rabbit hole now.
We're 51 minutes in, so let's turn up the heat.
We're
just getting started, dude.
This was actually the warm-up, so we'll start now.
Yeah.
So
Now that we've clarified what youth work is, let's get in. No, I wanted to get into a little bit more personal stories. You know, obviously you've experienced a lot with youth work and you've met a lot of different characters. Is there any situation that you found yourself in, you know, with a client? Is there a story that you can share with the audience, I guess, from start to finish that you just like you still think about today. Does that make sense?
For sure, yeah. And because I now also teach youth work part-time and at TAFE, and that's like full circle for me because I studied youth work at TAFE. Loved the TAFE experience, had really good teacher, planted the seed in my mind years ago. I'd love to come back and teach it, so now I get to do it. So it's really cool.
Yeah.
So, and in class, I talk about my experience as a youth worker to relate to the subject we're teaching, right? Rather than me just reading off a slide, I'll tell students stories all the time, and they're always... I try to match it to whatever we're talking about. And this one client keeps coming up, the one who I said wanted to be a millionaire when he was 18. Without going into too much detail, he came from a pretty traumatic background. Mother had passed away. Father was not on the scene, and that's all I can really say about that.
Yep.
But he was very determined to be like a success in life. And by this point, I'd been doing youth work for a while. I'd also been coaching. And I'm kind of like, great, this is like the ideal youth work client for me. He's goal-driven, he's entrepreneurial. He's reading all these books, and he'd get up early. He had a whiteboard in his lounge where he'd write all these ideas. I'm like, fantastic. This is the kind of client I've been sort of waiting for, right? You're not allowed to have favorites, but certain clients you just gel with, and you're like, we can speak the same language, which is great. So he was very committed to being successful in life, and he hadn't had a job. So I sat down with him, and I'll call him Kevin. I'm like, Kevin, what do you want to do, man? What's your dreams? He's like, yeah, I want to be a millionaire. I was like, cool. So how are you going to make your millions? And he's like, well, I like clothes, fashion, and graphic design. I'm like, cool, show me your stuff. And he started drawing these images, and they were really good. I'm like, okay, how can we use this? He's like, I want to put it on a T-shirt. I'm like, okay, I'll go talk to my manager. The program I was working on called Springboard, which was helping young people find jobs and stuff, we had a certain amount of funding for each client, and that funding could be used to pay for a course fees, or if they were a tradie to buy their tools, whatever. So I looked into getting him some T-shirts made. Well, actually, he kind of did most of the research, and he said, this is the place I want to go to. And we found out the price, and we were able to secure the funding. Took him to the meeting. He showed them their design, and with the money we had, they were able to print off 10 T-shirts. Yeah. 2 weeks later, went and picked up the T-shirts. They were all done. And he's like, cool, let's go sell them. I'm like, great. So I'm like, where do you want to go? So I was helping him try to explore this, right? Off we went to Chapel Street and in Melbourne, and he had walked into this store. He showed them the T-shirts. He's like, yep, we'll buy them off you. If we sell them, we'll let you know. And then a few weeks passed by, and he's sitting there looking at his phone. Like, they're not calling. Like, is anyone buying my T-shirts? And I'm like, you got to be patient, mate. It's going to take time, but you've made a start. And he's like, I need money now. Like, I'm going to be a millionaire in a year, and I haven't made anything. I'm like, okay. So without me saying to him, you're not going to be a millionaire because that's not my place. He might be a millionaire one day. Let's get you started. Like, you need a job, right? You need to make money. And my coaching brain was firing, and it's like, what job can you do to make money, but it's also going to support you to grow this business? Like, find a correlation there. He's like, I guess selling clothes. I'm like, fantastic. He'd never worked in a job before, and he had no experience. I said, and he was worried about that. I said, look, don't worry about that. Let's make your resume really specific and targeted. We'll mention on there in your career objective, you're making T-shirts, you're going to sell them, and let's target clothing stores. So he chose the 10 clothing stores he was interested in. These were stores he bought stuff from because he was a very fashionable guy. He's really cool. And they were all at Westfield in Doncaster. So all these stores are in Westfield. So we did up his resume, went off to Westfield. We made a day of it. And I said, okay, go into the first store, hand them your resume, introduce yourself, let me know how it goes. And I just kind of stood outside the store and watched. And he went in and just kind of handed the resume and walked back out. Like, how'd it go? He's like, oh, fucking shit. He's like, he cracked it. I'm like, oh, God. It's only the first store. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about it. And each time I gave him another tip to try. It's like, ask for the manager. What's the manager's name? And then the next store, it's like, they're not there. Find out when they're going to be back. Gave him a little question each time. When are they hiring? What are they offering? And he got a little more confident as he went in. We got to about the 7th or 8th store, and the last 2 were the ones he was really keen on. I said, let's save those for the end in case. Use the other ones as practice, because out of the way percentages work is out of 10, 2 might work. 2 of them might offer you a job, on average. So we went to those last 2, and he walked in. The manager happened to be there. And I was sitting out the front just watching him, and he was in there for about 10 minutes. And he was smiling. He was a very charismatic young guy. Arms were going. They were laughing. And I'm like, awesome, this looks good. He walks out all like chuffed and like, oh, tell me how it went. He goes, I just said to him, I want to work in clothing. I'm making my own T-shirts. The guy was really interested in the T-shirts. And he said he wants to offer me a work trial.
Wow.
I'm like, fantastic. It's like, when do you start? It's like, he says, come back tomorrow for a work trial. So we got him a new shirt for work and all that. I paid for that. Went back, he did a work trial. They offered him a job and he started working there. He had never worked anywhere before. And this was a high-end clothing store in Westfield.
That's so cool.
And look, he was late a few times and took an extra longer break, and he got told off a couple of times, but he was showing up and he was getting there to work.
Yeah.
Saved up a bit of money because we'd used all his funding, and went and got more T-shirts printed, made a new design. He kept pushing that. And about 6 months passed, and he's still working in the clothing store, I think, at the time, studying a business course. And he said, Brian, I was walking through the city and I saw this guy walking towards me from the opposite direction, and he was wearing one of my T-shirts. And I'm like, that's awesome. And he said, I didn't say anything to him. I just said, cool T-shirt. He's like, there you go. And then eventually that store he went to asked him for 50 T-shirts, and they sold all of them.
Wow.
So, yeah, I tell his story all the time, because it's like you get a young person like that who's got that dream, and what does most of society do, or even high school? It's like, no, come on, you got to be a bit more realistic. Be pragmatic. Don't aim so high. Play it safe. Like, fuck
So what do we
shit,
teach?
right?
We're literally teaching them just to like not take risk and then just like turn up for somebody else's job, work for somebody else.
That's
basically.
it. And look, this might be controversial, but there's enough people in the world doing that. We need people to step
100%.
out and shine and be an example. And it might mean stuffing up. It might mean making mistakes and taking risks. But by not doing any of that is the biggest mistake you can ever make, I reckon. You've got to try, right? So like I said to him, yeah, go for it. Like, build that T-shirt empire, but you need a day job to get you going.
And that's where I went wrong. When I was when I was like 19, 20, I wanted to, do film and everything. I was doing uni. I did do like bits and pieces, like part-time jobs here and there, obviously. But there would be these periods where I was like, oh, I just want to focus on just film. But then you're so poor that you can't fund any of the things you want to do.
That's it.
Right?
Yeah,
so you're just like, you're not doing anything,
being the broke artist.
Yeah,
really
so
sucks. Yeah.
Definitely. I feel like I probably would have worked more when I was younger if I had another shot at it, for sure.
It's not too late. You're still a young man, Katie.
I've changed that mindset a while ago, but yeah, no, you mean in taking risks? Definitely.
Yeah,
that's why we're here.
I'm 40, mate, and I'm still taking risks.
Oh, you got
day.
it. Yeah.
I'll never stop. No.
I think that's a really good story. Like, it sounded like you've sent him on the main quest, and you've got all these little side quests when it doesn't work out. Like, hey, come back and just try this angle.
Yeah, that's it. And it's like you've got to be able to shoot for your dreams, but play in the rules of the real world, because when you make it, you've got to be able to take that idea and present it back to the real world and find a place for it to fit. You know what I mean? I call it grounded dreaming. It's like you got your feet on the ground, like you've got to, because we all need a place to live and sleep. We need food in the fridge. We have to pay our bills.
Right.
You need, until you're independently wealthy or win Tats Lotto, you need to generate an income, and jobs are everywhere, and it's not necessarily the easy solution, but it's the practical solution. And then once you start making some progress and making money in other ways, then you can replace the income from a job. Yeah. But you've got to earn it. No one's going to give it to you. And even if they gave it to you, you're not going to appreciate it because you haven't worked for it.
Exactly.
You've got to fight your way there.
It sounded like Kevin had like a lot of limiting beliefs, and you were sending him on like the easiest tasks to crack that initial limiting belief, and then onto the next one, until he's like, okay, I can do this.
Absolutely, yeah. And there were some other examples with him when I first started working with him, and he didn't have a job, and he was just on youth allowance from Centrelink. And after they take the money out for his rent, he was left with like $70 for 2 weeks. It's like nothing. And he had some spending habits, which meant he would spend his money very quickly. And then he'd call me up, it's like, Brian, have you got a food voucher? And we would have $30 Coles vouchers for each client, usually one a week. And he'd get it, and 2 days later, Brian, have you got a food voucher? It's like, I'm like, what the hell is he spending this on? And they couldn't spend them at the bottle shop. It was only just for Coles. So I thought, all right, I'll go with him to the supermarket, and I'm just going to see what he buys.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you what to buy, mate, but here's your voucher. Go and get your groceries. And he goes, oh, yeah, I just get the same thing every time. he goes to the deli and gets these big schnitzels, like the big gourmet ones, like 4 of them. That's like $26 gone, and a loaf of bread. And he goes home.
No veggies.
No, he would go home and cook them all, and then he wouldn't eat all of them. He'd feel sick. Was it not schnitzels? It was like the already made chicken things. You know, with everything inside them. So really thick, kind of extravagant things. Super expensive, and he wouldn't eat all of them. And he'd cook them all at once, though. Leave them in a frying pan, and put the frying pan in the freezer with the cooked chicken on there.
My God.
And then get that out and put it in the oven to defrost it and eat it again. So he was getting sick.
Salmonella poisoning a little bit.
Yeah, I'm like, oh God, what are you doing?
Dude.
So part of my job was to go along with him and say, right, we're going to budget for this shopping here.
Yeah.
And we managed to get quite a bit with like, the $30, and then he was like $6 short. And like, you know what, I'll get this other $6. It's fine.
Oh,
we got him some food. We cooked up that food. We got containers, portioned it, froze it. So he had like 6 days worth of meals there. So
nice.
He learnt to do stuff like that. So he's but coming back to what you were saying about limiting beliefs, that's a big one, because limiting beliefs can be negative and positive. Like your belief can be like, I'm going to be a multimillionaire in 6 months. That's a great belief to have, but it's limiting because it's not really practical or achievable, and it's going to take much longer than that. So it's like, we're not going to take away that passion. We're just going to stretch it out a bit more and figure out, well, how are you going to actually get there? You know what I mean? Instead of saying, oh, you'll never achieve that. You're not special enough for that.
Yeah.
Like we hear that from society and the media.
I think also like the irony too is like when you're 18, 19, 20, you feel really old and you feel like you haven't.
I remember saying I felt old when I was 19, 20.
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing?
You're like, decades.
I should have already achieved this by 19.
Yeah,
you know? And it's like,
that
you're 20. You're like,
yeah.
We just got out of school. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We literally just got out of being told what to do all day, every day.
That's it.
You know, and then all of a sudden now you're going to be an entrepreneur. Now you're going to think for yourself all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And that takes time.
It does.
You know?
It takes time to manifest it. Like the passion's there, and you should never let go of that, because you'll have the best ideas and intentions when you're young. As you get older, like you don't come up with as many great ideas, but you learn how to make things happen more effectively, because you learn how the world works. Right?
You have to have that childlike wonder still, right?
You got to keep it there. So any young people listen to this, write those ideas down. Don't throw them away, because they are gold.
It's all possible.
It's possible.
Yeah.
And then you'll come back and be like, now I've got some experience in the real world. Here's how I can apply this idea to my job or my industry and set myself apart. So, like, don't throw those ideas away. They're valuable.
You know what they say, your net worth is your network. It's
right.
that simple, right? It's just connecting with people. You can make huge things, like building a business, just networking.
Yeah.
It all comes back to networking. Yeah, even if you have a skill, you still need to network to make it happen, because you need the resources.
You do, yeah. And you've got to have something to offer people that's like, wow, that's cool. I want that, So that's the whole business talk. We probably don't have time to get into that today.
No, we'll have you back again, Brian.
Oh, absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure, mate. We're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah, 100%.
I guess.
You go, man.
I was going to say, so we've talked a lot about sort of, younger, teenagers, and then you've got young adults. With the career coaching, I think you work with people up to 30. Is that right?
I can, yeah.
So what do you think the differences are working with someone in their sort of late 20s versus somebody, in their early 20s or, late teens? What's sort of the challenges they come to you with? Or how do you feel like you help them?
I guess the differences are, when it's late teens, it's usually maybe they're coming out of their first job at, say, like a supermarket or Macca's or something, and looking for something a little more substantial and long-term. When they're in their early 20s, usually they're a student who's currently studying or has just been qualified and is now looking to start their career. And usually if they're in their late 20s, it's looking to reinvent their career or move up. So those are the stages, and we're all sort of at those stages. Yeah, the different challenges are working with teens who've never had a job. Like, I can help anyone find a job almost anywhere, because what I've learned from the industry. But when you're working with a 17, 18-year-old who's had no experience whatsoever, they're like, no one's going to hire me.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how do you think people get experience? Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not just someone gives you that first job. You've got to find your experience somewhere else. And like, what are my transferable skills?
Exactly, yeah. I was going to say, it has to relate somewhat.
Yeah, that's how you help teens. And those who are studying, it's an interesting one with the early 20s, because I've coached clients who are like, loved what they've studied, and they're like, right, now I'm ready to take on the world. They just don't know how to get a start in their industry. Or they've come out of this qualification and like, I'm not interested in this anymore. and or I was told to study this, or I chose this, but it was obviously the wrong choice. I didn't really expect that this is what it was going to be. And they're like, I've wasted 4 years. Well, I was like, no, you haven't. Like, think of what else you've learned in that time. You've learned how to learn. You've learned time management. You've learned task management. You've written essays. Like, those are all skills you can use. How else can we? It's not just limiting you, this qualification. It's opening you up to other things. So it's getting them to look at that differently and not do nothing with it, because then it is a waste if you do nothing with it. You can still do something with it. And then career reinvention in the late 20s, because then at that age you're starting to think about maybe having a partner, maybe starting a family in a few years, buying a home, all those kind of things. So it's about, how do I make more money, or how do I get more recognition for what I can do and what I can know? Because maybe where they're working in their late 20s is where they started in their early 20s, and they're like, I'm done, I'm ready to move up. And that was certainly the case for me. Like, I started studying to become a trainer and a coach in my sort of mid to late 20s, because I'd sort of done what I could in my teens and early 20s. I'm like, right, I've got to move up here. And then you're always moving up. And then in your 30s, it's a whole different thing.
And I imagine sometimes that looks like taking a step back and doing something you enjoy rather than like taking a pay cut and doing something you enjoy as well. Yeah,
look, if you can work in something that you really enjoy and that you love, and it means you might take a pay cut, then that's a personal choice. I think if it's about what you value more, like can you live on $10,000 less a year? Yes or no? And if you can, it's like, great. Like, think of what else you get back with that new time. Or maybe the job you were doing was really stressful, or you didn't like the people you were with, or the culture of the company, right? So you've got to think about what's really important to you and then go in that direction. Doesn't mean you'll get it all the time or every time, but you've got something to aim for.
And we're back. Sorry guys, we just had to take a bit of a break there. So Brian, tell us a little bit about yourself, I guess. Right. Like from the beginning, like right now, obviously you've for those who don't know, Brian is also an author. You wrote a book, Setting Goals.
I have, yes.
Published it?
Yep.
Yeah. And you've got something else in the works at the moment? Or?
I do, yeah. I'm always writing. So, I guess outside of youth work and life coaching, the dream is to be a full-time writer. But even then I'll be like, well, I want something else to do, because then it could be too much. But writing is a huge part of my life. It has been since I was a teenager. Like, I journaled a lot as a teen. I'd write some science fiction stories, like my own version of certain films. I'd write 5-page stories, that kind of thing. Then in my 20s, I got a bit more serious with it. I was traveling a lot in my 20s, so I did some travel writing. I just did some articles, started putting together my first book, which was never published, probably won't ever be, of this big 1-year trip I did around the world. And I read it back now and I'm like, oh, Jesus. Like, it's terrible. It's terrible. Like, I talk about, there's 7 pages about me and some guys drinking beer, at a pub. But back then I'm like, man, this is living, this is life. And I'm like, we were just a bunch of 20-year-olds getting pissed and talking about all the times we'd scored or pretending to, so. So it's fine. But, like, it's interesting to read that to see where my thinking was at as a, 21, 22-year-old. And then I met one of my first mentors I met in my 20s, who was helped me with my, like, public speaking and all that stuff, had written a few books. And he did a bit of acting on the side. He did radio. He was kind of the self-made man. I'm like, I want to be like this guy. Like, he was my first real mentor and role model, and I wanted to model him a bit. And we were talking about goals one day, and he said to me, what do you want to do? I'm like, I want to write a book. He's like, cool. Well, when you've got an idea, let me know. And around the same time, I started my coaching business. And one of my coaching sort of advisors said, what are you going to do to set yourself apart? And I'm like, I haven't really thought about it. She's like, what do you like to do outside of coaching? I said, I like writing. She's like, why don't you write a book and you can package it and you can be part of your brand and all that stuff. I'm like, all right, cool. So I stopped and started a few times, called on my mentor and was like, I've got like 3 ideas for a book, but I can't decide which one. And then I would talk one up and then I would talk it down, and I was in this kind of cycle of stopping and starting and getting nowhere. And he's like, Brian, just write the freaking book. Just write it. Your first one might sell 7 copies. It's not going to be a bestseller. He said, my first book, was okay, didn't sell well. Second book got more focused, sold 200,000 copies or whatever it was. I'm like, awesome. And so I kind of took his advice, and I just knuckled down and wrote a book. And my first book, which was self-published, which just sort of happened by chance because I bought a self-publishing package online with my tax return one year. I'm like, if I buy this, it'll inspire me to write a book. Bought it, did nothing with it, right? 3 years later, they call me up. It's like, hello, sir, you've still got the self-publishing package. It never expires. When do you want to use it? I'm like, oh, okay. So that kind of gave me accountability. Like they want me to send them a book.
Yeah.
And at this time, I was starting blogging, right? Film reviews as a bit of a hobby. And then I was developing what I call the smartest method. So you've heard of SMART goals?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the acronym SMART goals, which most people know. I was
playing
around with
a million by 18, like
that's right.
Smart goals.
Yeah, that's right. So specific, measurable, attainable,
say.
realistic, and time framed.
Can you get that again, just so the audience gets
Sure.
that?
Yeah. So there's different versions of it, but usually stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time framed. So it breaks a goal down, makes it practical. And I was playing around with that acronym, like this is flawed. Something's missing from this because I'd used it and it was really great in helping me plan a goal, but not following through on the goal.
Right.
Right. So like I had all these beautifully handwritten goals on my desk. I'm like, yep, I've got goals. I'll get started next week, and nothing happened. Like I'm not taking action. I'm not following through. I'm not inspired by this. No one knows about it. I'm kind of keeping it to myself. And I thought, hey, there's the smartest method. So I added EST on the end. E being energized, excited. S being share it with someone. T being take the first step. So I kind of developed this as a blog, and then once that was 13, 14 sections, I'm like, okay, I've got the makings of a book here. So I put that together as a book. Did this with our firstborn child, but luckily she slept through the night from a very young age, so I was writing at night. Sometimes I wrote at work. Hope no one from work's listening. But it was on my lunch break, I promise. On the train, just wherever. And then it came together. And self-published, so it wasn't on bookshelves, but you could buy it online. And I learnt a lot through the process of that on how to write a book. And that it is a process. It's a project. It's because I started several books before, and like my client I spoke about before, who wanted to be a millionaire in 6 months. I'm like, I'm going to write a book in a week, because I'd read this book from Stephen King, who said he wrote one of his novellas in 1 week. He was also on cocaine most of the time, so he was like probably writing 1 million words a day or something like that.
Yeah.
None of it made sense, but it worked for him. So I'm like, that'll be me, not the cocaine, but writing really quick, and it didn't work because I thought, this is not perfect. I'm not inspired. Like, what's missing? So kind of from all of that, I learned how to have something practical, but the fuel you need to keep going. And that was like what created the smartest method. And so I self-published that in 2014. It's still doing the rounds today. Occasionally I get people borrow it and, visit the blog. It has a blog attached with it. So it's done all right.
Were you trying to apply the smartest method when you were writing the book?
I was actually, well, because like I learned from my teacher, it's like you learn best by teaching. So I was trying to prove my method worked by using it at the same time. And it has a couple of little holes, and I'm not going to lie, it's not perfect. It's not the premier goal setting solution if there isn't one. If there even is one, but it's effective. I think it helps someone just break it down. It certainly helped.
Do you ever feel like sometimes you can plan too much? This is the problem, I guess, like I've always had with, like listening to people like Tony Robbins, right? Like you were saying earlier in the conversation, like when you scroll through Twitter, you get all motivated and everything. But really that last part of just taking the action, that's literally going to change your life. You will learn as you're just trying to, do a podcast.
Just do it. You can.
Or
they do say if you fail to plan to fail. But if you over plan, you'll never act. It's like you get stuck in that planning phase.
Yeah.
And I used to do this all the time. It's like you get addicted to planning because when you're planning, you haven't made any mistakes yet.
Right.
It's perfect. It's like I'm carving out this
hypothetical
straight line. It's going to be brilliant. Nothing's going to stop me. And then you get started and life's like, hey, hold on. I'm going to throw this shit at you. And you're like, oh, fuck it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Because how do you can't plan for those curveballs, right? Like, you might have found, say you want to make a band, right? Like a famous band. Mm-hmm. And you got an amazing bass player. All of a sudden he loses his fingers. You know what I mean? What do you do then? You get robot fingers. You know what I mean? There's always a way.
Or you can learn to play with his toes and then
exactly.
You never know, right? Yeah, you got to work around it.
Yeah.
And take the life challenges on and apply it to whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Because people want people want like the silver bullet. They want like the fast way to success. Like we all do, right? Because life's freaking short. It's like, I just want to get there, you know?
Yeah.
But we also accept that it's not going to be easy. And we tend to listen to the people more who are successful, yes, but who've also worked their ass off.
And share it too.
Yeah.
Right? Like
right.
and actually be like, hey, you know what? For 20 years, I didn't do shit. Or I didn't succeed anything. And then all of a sudden,
Boom.
an opportunity hit. And that's why I listen to people who are just like completely candid and honest about like what's going on, you know?
Yeah, you have to be, because that's how the world works. You know, it takes time.
Exactly. How do we measure success anyway, right? Like, what is it when you've got 3 million in the bank? Or is it when you've got 10 million in the bank? Or is it if you Elon Musk, you know?
Yeah. Or is it just that you're happy and content with who you are and where you are in life?
Or is it that you're a good person, you treat other people well?
Yeah.
That's how I measure success. My success is measured on how am I as a person? You know what I mean? Like, am I a genuine person? You know, do I have the necessities that I need, right? Like, yes, it's good to have that extra goal, you know, to be, you know, successful in the sense of like monetarily or whatever. But I don't know.
I think success is you're kind of walking your talk. You know, you're living proof of what you have to offer the world. Like you figured out what makes me unique. Where's my potential? What can I offer people? And you're doing it, whether that makes money or not. That to me is success, I think, because so many people are stuck doing things that they hate or doing the wrong thing and wondering, why am I so unhappy or frustrated? Because they've been told they have to do it, or they have more of a value on appearing like something or having a certain amount of money or a certain kind of house.
Yeah.
All of that's fine, but it's like you've got to find the thing that's unique about you and share that. Whether it's just a small blog that only 5 people read, or whether you're Elon Musk, you know, there's not one's better than the other. You know what I mean?
Right.
Each has pros and cons. Yeah.
I think like I've always set goals since I've been younger, but I also see the drawbacks or like the potential problems with it. And this one quote really stood out to me, and this was, you could be climbing the right ladder only your whole life, only to realize it was propped up against the wrong wall.
Yeah.
So like you know,
that.
it's not just about, you know, setting goals, but really understanding, okay, why is, you know, that goal so important to you? So,
That's right. Is it true success, or is it the appearance of success? You know, like I think that's an important question we all have to answer, because a certain, you know, society might have this certain version of success, like work in the corporate sector, make this much money,
earn certain money, have a nice house
versus renting one. It's like it's determine your own success.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you can easily fall into that trap, because it's also it's marketed towards us all day, every day. You're right.
Yeah.
You know, the new cars, you know, if you're listening to music, you know, the music videos with like a lot of the pop music these days is just like, you know, women on cars and, you know.
That's it. And
like
that might look great, but then anything new, any novelty eventually just becomes normal. It becomes what you're used to. And then you're like, oh, now I'm depressed again. I thought this was going to make me eternally happy. And now I'm like, there's nothing to chase anymore. There's nothing to pursue. It's like I can have anything, and now I'm depressed. So you know, so sometimes it's okay to go without that stuff.
Definitely,
you know, it keeps you hungry. Yeah,
and I think I guess in our sort of society, we promote the individual over the group a lot more.
Yeah.
And I feel like that you fall into this trap of thinking, what do I need for myself? Myself. How do I be happy? How do I do this to be happy?
That's right.
And you probably won't find happiness there, most likely because you're not doing things to help other people. Like, I think once I changed, you know, in the last few years, the last 3 or 4 years, I've changed my mindset a lot. And how can I help others? How can I be selfless in this situation?
Yeah.
And
that's great.
You get back so much more.
Definitely.
Way more.
Yep.
I feel like.
For sure.
And in fact, you get what you wanted when you was being selfish.
Yeah.
That you couldn't get it because you couldn't assemble a team around you to do that.
That's right.
Because you wouldn't work with anyone else because you're just thinking, how can I get it? You know what I mean? It's
Totally. Most of us find that the things that make us really happy are just simple things.
Yeah.
You know, spending time with family and friends, being able to have a flexible start and finish time with work, being able to just sit down and binge on your favorite show or read a book or listen to music, right? So if there's things blocking you from having that, that's what you need to sort out. So going back to what you were saying, if you can find a way to help other people to get to that place where they can find their happiness and live it through some kind of service or a program or a product, whether that's as a coach.
Youth work.
youth work, whatever. And then you are then rewarded financially for helping them. That lets you do the things you want to do that make you happy, right? So it's a give and take thing.
That's a good thing. That's a great point. But I was just going to ask as well, did you find yourself very happy doing youth work?
Most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were some days where it was really, really hard.
Yeah.
For different reasons. I think the frustration of not moving forward, because if my clients weren't moving forward, I felt stuck. It's like, well, what can I do? You know, I kind of beat myself up a bit and say, this job's not going anywhere, or I'm unhappy, I'm frustrated. The pay's not great because it's community service work. And as my circumstances changed, I started a family and I wanted to have a house, then the
I think
pay
that's
became
crazy.
a problem. Yeah.
That's crazy that we don't pay people like youth workers more.
Enough,
Why are we paying the guy sitting in an office, drawing up images for, I won't say names because I don't want to get sued, but certain like soda can products, right?
Right.
And it's like, which is basically killing people, making people sick.
Yep.
But because it's popular, all of a sudden, and there's lots of money around it, it's more important than someone who's out there literally changing lives. That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
I think we got it backwards on that,
Yeah,
100%.
I think it's the way of the world, money goes where money flows. Like they want to invest money and get a return for it. So, but, by caring for whether it's youth, early childhood, aged care, that's still an investment. We have to look after everybody. Whether they make us money back or not, that's not what it's about.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all about, unfortunately, government and corporate thinking is like money for money, right?
Yeah.
I've got a question. So coming like full circle, right? Like with coaching and development.
Yep.
If like 20-year-old Brian came to, 40-year-old Brian and asked, hey, I look up to you. I'm looking for like just general advice. What wisdoms can you part with me?
Yep.
What do you think you would say to 20-year-old Brian?
Good question. Stop eating KFC, probably. I ate a lot of it back then. No, that's a great question. I think for the most part, where I thought I'd be at this stage of my life, at the age of 20, is not physically where I am, but where I am as a person and as an individual and as a man and a father and husband. I'm pretty happy with that. So I think I'd say my 20-year-old self, just keep being you, just keep moving forward. Because what's happened in my life in the past 20 years, like the good things and the bad things and the tragedies and all of this stuff, like you never think is going to happen to you.
You can't plan for it.
No, and that's like a whole other conversation for another time. But like when you're 19, 20 and the world's at your feet and you're running out there, it's like, right, let's go. I've got these big dreams and stuff. And then life starts to happen to you.
Yeah.
And things happen. At a young age, I lost my cousin. Several years ago, my best friend died. And some other very close losses recently. But it's keep going. Just keep moving forward is what I'd say to him. Yeah.
Keep turning up. There's always other people who rely on you to be, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There and positive and present. And that goes back again to that selfless, that mindset of being selfless. It's not about me anymore,
Yeah.
I think that's really healthy. I think we've forgotten it a lot in everyday society. In fact, it took me years to figure that out.
Yeah. But if I can just quickly challenge that, and I've only just learned this recently.
Yeah.
I used to be selfish and then realized that didn't work. Then I thought I've got to be selfless all the time. That doesn't work either.
Yeah.
In between that, you've got self-worth.
That's a good point.
Self-worth, right?
Yeah.
Is like as much as I give to others, I have to give back to myself. Whatever I get for me, I will share with other people. It's finding an equal balance of that.
That's true. That's a good point. Like complete selflessness also can be quite destructive too.
Yeah, because you become altruistic and you're putting everyone
you don't have barriers.
Yourself.
People can treat you any way they want, and you just keep turning up
you
anyway.
Please everyone. And you get taken
true.
advantage of. No.
Yeah.
Self-worth has taught me yes, I will help you absolutely, but here are the limits of that.
Correct.
And now I'm on my time. Go away nicely. I've got to go do my thing now for me, and I'll come back to you, and I'll be refreshed and energized and ready to go.
Yeah.
So that's what I've learned.
I heard something really interesting, which was this idea that it takes 2 years to sort of internalize what's happening on the outside world into your inside world. So let's say we're starting this podcast and we get that sort of imposter syndrome. We're like, hey, why should people listen to us? It takes sort of 2 years to be like, hey, actually, we're whatever it is, and it could be starting coaching or teaching or a new job.
Yeah.
And I think knowing that, you can sort of just be patient with yourself and your advice, right? To your point.
Yeah.
Just keep going.
Keep going.
That's
Keep
it.
going. Yeah.
The more of these we do, the better we'll get.
100%.
You know, like we might listen to this back and go, man, I wish I had said this, or I wish I didn't stumble here, right?
Of course. Yeah.
And that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Accept it. It's just we're probably going to hate listening back to this. You know, like honestly.
Yeah,
right?
I've been really boring.
No, you haven't. Definitely not. But I'm just saying,
Sorry
like,
for that, guys.
no, you haven't at all, man. It's been really insightful, actually. But what I'm saying is, like, just that insecurity and that personal, like, you know,
Sure.
expectation of yourself to just like come out the gate, you know, and just be Elon Musk or Joe Rogan, I guess is a better example. You know, it's just it's going to take us time.
Yeah. 100%.
You know? When cameras are on you and people are listening to you, you change whether you like it or not to some degree.
Yeah.
And the goal is to get back as close as possible to your genuine self.
Yep.
And then that's when people, I feel like, listen better, because it's like you're not hiding anything. You're not out here just being like, you know, scripted. You know, we don't have a script. We don't have any, you know, questions. We didn't even do any. No, I'm just kidding. We did research. We did research.
Yeah. I was just walking down the street like, hey, mate, you free? Come in here.
Yeah, mate. Just no.
My name's actually Phil. I work at Coles down the street.
Yeah. Psych.
All right. No, you go.
I was going to actually jump into your next book, but yeah, if you've got a question.
I was just going to say, let's land this plane and, you know, talk to us about the project that you're working on, your second book, and you know, where can, you know, tell us a little bit about that, and where should people look to find more and, you know, more about yourself?
Yeah, great, thank you. So I've got a website, just brianmcaleer.com. So Brian with an I, MCALER.com. And that talks about my coaching, talks about my writing, just a few little bits and pieces. I'm on Facebook, Brian McAleer Coaching Services. I'm on LinkedIn. So you can find me online pretty easily. And happy just to connect with anyone who's interested. And then the second book I've been working on has been a real like labor of love. It's called Life is a Road. And it's this motto that I sort of conceived at quite a young age. I was about 20, that I was trying to make sense of the world. I'm like, well, is life a game? Is life a test? Is life a maze? What is life, right? And I'm like, well, life's a road. Because I was like a 19, 20-year-old P-plater driving around in my car more than doing anything else. So I'm like, yeah, cars, cool, right? So I thought that's the example, right? Life is a road. We're all drivers in our own cars, and there's other drivers that pass us by, etc. So I kind of found these comparisons. And then it just kind of sat there dormant for a while and did nothing. And then it came up in conversations over the years, and then after people were asking me about it, like, oh, life is a road, tell me about that. I'm like, sure. Okay, I'll think of something. And then the conversation, and it got clearer and clearer what it was. And I started writing the book in 2018. I'm like, I've been doing youth work and life coaching for a while. I have other books I'd like to write. I want to write fiction. So it's like I need to do a brain dump and get all this stuff out into a book, just release it and let it go. Because I found after I'd written my first book, like writing a book is a great way of releasing all this stuff that's in your head.
It's cathartic.
That's
almost
just swimming around, bugging you, and that, you know, you've got to do something with it. A great way to externalize that is in a book, and then you kind of like release it. And then you can always, it's not like you forget what you wrote or you forget that knowledge. It's not like it leaves you completely. You just then you're able to then just kind of summarize it a bit because you've released all of that content out of your head. So that was the big thinking behind this second book. And it was hard to write because I wasn't really sure where it was going, what the philosophy was. I kind of had to figure it out as I went along. And then, you know, a year and a half into that, COVID hit, and then I stopped. A couple other things happened, you know, personally and with work that made me stop and start. But I kept coming back to it. So eventually, you know, I finished it earlier this year. And what it is it's about helping young adults with life and career direction. But really anyone can read it. And it makes the argument that, you know, your life is a road and you've got to figure out you're going to have more than one destination in life. It's not just to be just this person. It's like maybe your destination is to be a millionaire like my client, but, you know, who do you need to be and what do you have to do to get there? There's going to be all these other little journeys along the way. So it's about navigating the journeys of life. It's about figuring out, because a big part of how people drive on the road is not always, but can be a good indication of what kind of a person they are. So if they're like tailgating everyone on the highway, you know they're an asshole, right? In real life,
we had one earlier.
They're not going to hop out of the car and be like, "Oh, sorry, mate, sorry about that." They're going to be like trying to run you off the road.
I slow down. I make sure I'm just on the limit when someone does that to me.
Yeah.
And then I'll just like stay at that limit. I don't speed up at all. I'm just like, actually.
Yeah, for sure. You got the tailgaters there, the arseholes. You got the Sunday drivers who are just taking their time because they're cautious and everything, and they frustrate us because they're going so slow. So we tend to drive a little bit how we live our life, I find.
Yeah.
So there's that comparison, and then it talks about the different roads of life, and in my opinion, there's three. There's Main Street, there's the freeway, and then there's the road less travelled. Most people live on the freeway. Life is fast. It's fast-paced. It's always moving forward. We don't really stop to look around much. That's the freeway mentality. Main Street is kind of like, well, let's just go where everything is and where everyone else is. But the road less travelled is you quite often are going to go down that bumpy road by yourself. You don't know exactly where it's going to go, but usually it turns out to be somewhere really good. So that's kind of my thinking. So it uses, the analogy of driving, roads, and, all these destinations in life to make it relatable and make it understandable.
That's really cool.
So I'm still figuring out how to summarize that into like 10 seconds or less so I can make the book kind of marketable. My publisher, I think, will help me with that. But that's sort of where it's headed. Yeah.
That's awesome. Love it. All right. Well, I think that's a wrap, guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But
for sure.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks, Caden. Yeah, thanks, Mark. It's been a great chat. Yeah, really enjoyed it. And good luck with your podcast. And
appreciate it.
Remember me when you're famous, okay?
You'll be back again, dude.
Absolutely. Yeah. Round two.
We'll definitely do more of these for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good work.
Absolutely.